Hi, I'm Linda Matthews, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make a stitched mixed media assemblage that's suitable for hanging on the wall. This assemblage is fun and creative to make and comprises a small wooden clipboard that has a separate stitched background with a mini journal hanging from it. The stitched background attaches by clipping it onto the board. To get started, you need a small wooden clipboard. I found this one in the craft store, and it's about 6 inches wide by 9 inches high. You can leave the surface untreated, but I stained mine with some wood stain and then left it to dry overnight. For the background, you'll need a piece of thick paper or cardstock, slightly smaller than the clipboard. I used some cardi paper, which is a fibrous rag cotton paper. Because it's quite thick, you can easily paint it and sew on it. I like to make the edges of my papers look ragged and roughed up. To achieve that sort of effect, paint some water along the edges with a small paintbrush and allow it to penetrate through the paper. This makes the paper soft so that you can then carefully pull away small sections at a time, leaving a roughed up edge. To add some strength to the paper so that it doesn't tear when sewing, use a small palette knife and apply a coat of white gesso over the surface of the paper. The gesso doesn't have to be perfectly applied, and you don't need to paint right to the edges. This also adds some visual texture to make the surface look more interesting. Allow the gesso to dry, then paint the paper with some acrylic or watercolour paints to add some colour. Again, the paint doesn't need to be perfectly applied, and you don't need to paint right to the edges. When painting backgrounds like this, I like to use several different colours. Instead of using one colour, which can look a little boring, several colours can be blended and mixed together to add depth and shading. I'm using golden fluid acrylic paints. These paints are highly pigmented, so they have very strong colour. However, you could use any other type of paint you have on hand. Once the paint is dry, place the paper on the clipboard so you can position the background fabric a little easier, and then cut or tear a piece of fabric for the background. The fabric should be smaller by about an inch along the sides and bottom and about 2 inches along the top. I like to tear my fabric pieces so that the edges are raw and frayed. I find that this adds extra texture and dimension to the finished piece. Position the fabric on top of the paper and use a glue stick to add some glue to each corner, and this will hold the fabric in position while you stitch. The fabric that I'm using is hand-dyed silk velvet, but you could use any type of fabric. To sew the background fabric to the paper, use some thick hand embroidery thread and hand stitch around the outer edges. I'm making my stitches large so they stand out, and I'm using a combination of straight stitch and cross stitch. To make the centre strip, I've layered lots of different types of fabric in different widths and lengths, together with some small scraps of fabric and lace at the top and bottom. I've included a few beads strung onto a few short lengths of decorative threads and fibres for embellishment on the bottom of the strips. And I've added a Chinese coin charm with a metal flower button at the top. To make these types of layered strips, simply play around with your fabric pieces until you're happy with the layout and design. To add additional visual texture, I'm sewing the top 2 fabric strips together with several rows of running stitch with a few cross stitches along the bottom. Now that the strip section is complete, the top section can be added. I made this section using a set of small fabric scraps of different sizes and shapes, layered and held together with a cross stitch. I made the bottom section using a small scrap of fabric and lace, together with a few short pieces of decorative fibres, knotted together with beads attached at each end. Sew the beads on first, then attach the fabric and lace scraps with a few decorative stitches. Once the fabric strip is completed, position it at the top center on the paper background, center the button on the top section, then stitch through all the layers to attach everything together. To make the button for the top section, I used a small metal button in the shape of a flower, and I pushed the shank of the button through an old Chinese coin charm. Together they form an interesting button embellishment. Once the background is complete, it's time to make the mini journal. The finished size of the mini journal is approximately 2 inches wide by 2.5 inches high. To make it, cut or tear several fabric, paper and lace scraps approximately 4 inches wide by 2.5 inches high. Then fold them in half and layer them to create the journal. I've made my mini journal using some fabric, lace and paper scraps, a piece of tea bag paper and a small card with a stamped message on it. For the front of the mini journal, I chose a metal embellishment in the shape of a bird. I made a fabric page by stitching 2 pieces of fabric together using a running stitch. To assemble the mini journal, stack all the pages together and fold in half. Cut a piece of hand embroidery thread about 24 inches long and thread it through an embroidery needle. Starting on the outside near the top, push the needle through to the inside along the fold, leaving a thread tail of about 8 inches. This extra length will be used to wrap around and hang the mini journal from the top button. Push the needle through to the outside halfway down the fold, then back through to the inside near the bottom of the fold, then back to the outside through the middle hole. Tie off in a knot at the top on the outside. I finished off by gluing a small piece of lace to the back page using some tacky glue, just to dress it up a bit. I also found a small butterfly fussy cut which I glued to the centre page. To finish off, I glued the bird embellishment to the front of the mini journal using tacky glue. To make a tie closure for the mini journal, I cut several strands of decorative fibres, knotted them together several times along the length, then added a metal charm to each end. To attach the mini journal, wind the thread tails that are on the outside of the mini journal around the button at the top of the fabric strip section and allow the journal to dangle. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and also visit my website where you'll find free tutorials and printables for creative journaling.